Hi everybody, it's Annette from The Art of Intuition. Today we are going to talk about our roles and changing our roles and why we don't want to do that and what happens when we don't do that. So, what do we mean when we say roles? And what do we mean when we say we want to stay stuck in our roles? And what happens when we stay stuck in our roles? I heard someone say this today. I was listening to a YouTube channel and they said something about healing instantly and how that was impossible. And now the people talking are very much rooted in their human consciousness. And they're like, oh, you can't do that. You can't heal instantly. Well, let's preference that. Human consciousness, human body cannot heal instantly. So if we're talking emotional healing here is what they were talking about. Doesn't have the capacity to do that because we have too many cords of attachment to the story of what caused the trauma in the first place. We have too much in the way of being able to just say, okay, that's over, I'm moving on. And that's basically what emotional healing is. It's just we don't attach to it anymore. We're moving on from that. It's a different dimension, it's a different reality. It doesn't matter. None of these people even exist anymore in a sense. If they're not in your reality right in this moment, it never happened. In this reality, it's totally different. In this timeline, this is totally different. We're in a totally different thing. So the whole preference was, oh, we can't do that. But we're the reason we can't do that. And one of the reasons we cannot do that is because we stay stuck. And we don't want to shift our roles. We don't want to change our roles. We want to stay, if we use the example of our parents, which is a great one for a lot of people, we want to stay in the role of we're their child. As long as we stay in the role of we're their child, then we can blame them for all the trauma and drama of our childhood, right? And everything that's happened to us and how we brought all that through to our next relationship, or however people are going to paint it when we're in these realities, how our human consciousness paints it, right? Because we want to stay in that role. As long as we stay in the role of a child and they stay in the role of the parents, they're kind of taking the responsibility for everything we've done in those existences when that was their role. And for a while that was their role. But no one has the same role all the time. If we even equate this to Hollywood, no one plays the same role every time. Even if they switch their name up, and they're in the similar type of movie, they're still in a different role technically. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to change our role. We don't want to all of a sudden act as the parent and now they're the children. We want to keep all the stuff the same because if we shift our role, we now are going to lose our connection to what is tying us to these realities. And that might seem like, oh no, that's what we want to do. And we might feel like that's what we want to do. When we have to drop the story around it, we have to drop the survivor energy, we have to drop all these words of what we were, who we are. We have an identity around those things. Our human consciousness has an identity around all of that stuff. It has an identity around all of that energy. So we don't really want to let that stuff go. When we go talk about therapy and we talk about our human consciousness going to therapy, it'll drag out this stuff for years and years and years. You see so many people saying they worked through something in therapy for 10 years or whatever. Because we don't get to the root of it. We would want to keep rehashing the same story. It's like we're still in the same movie. We keep playing the same rollout over and over and over and over again, and we expect it to be different. We're going to rehash the same story. Now, technically, the more we rehash the story, we are clearing the story. It is an incredibly long way to do it. It is the way to do it where we just continue to drag out the story. We're dragging out the narrative. If you ever watched a movie or read a book, a TV show where you feel like this narrative is being dragged out, that's what we do. We do the same thing. We don't want to shift. We don't want to change our role. We don't want to step into a new role. We don't want to give up the identity of our old role, even if it was not an identity that we would look at and go, wow, that was an amazing identity. That was just so much trauma attached to that. And there's a part of us that feels like we want to let that go, but there's a part of us that has the cords of attachment to that story, to that identity, and we don't want to let that go. So we will go on and on and on in these iterations of realities where we double down on the story. Every time we tell the story, we technically recreate the reality. That's why we end up in a lot of the similar scenarios. We play these scenarios out in our life. And we want to blame someone for why we do it, so we don't want to shift the roles. If we shift the roles, we have to shift the blame. We have to blame ourselves for what we created. We have to blame ourselves for what we allow. We have to change ourselves to actually shift all that stuff. So if someone asks a question to me, can we heal instantly? And I don't even like the word healing, because the human has to heal, the soul doesn't have to heal. Can we heal instantly? Yes, of course you can. Your soul is, you can call in pieces of your soul. I mean, why we feel so disconnected from our soul, because we parsed our soul up. So our soul is so parsed up over so many existences, over what we've done in this existence, where we give our piece of ourselves away. We have to bring all that stuff back in. Now, what gets in our way of letting that stuff go immediately, resolving that stuff immediately, is all of our human stuff we have attached to it. That is why we feel like it can take years and years and years and years. And that's why even when we start trying to resolve these things, it still takes years and years and years and years and years to let some of this stuff really resolve, and to where we don't have any attachment to it at all. We don't have a story. We don't tell the story anymore. We don't rehash the story over and over again, because we don't have an identity to the story. We don't need the story to feel like we are worthy of something. And that's another thing we'll get into. We will tell the same stories over and over and over again, doubling down on the realities, because it gives us a feeling of purpose. It gives us a feeling of who we are. It gives us a feeling of that's what we are. Whether we're getting sympathy from the story, we're getting compassion from the story. If we're making people angry by telling the story or taking on this role, it's still giving us something. The trick is, what is it giving us? Why do we double down on it? Why are we so afraid to change our roles out and get a different reality? Now, we shift our roles, the reality is going to shift. I promise you the reality will shift if you shift your role. The role you are taking on, that reality will shift the reality once you shift the role. Now, will people in the reality want to shift their role? That's a different question. If they don't want to shift their role, and they want to continue playing out the same role, the same trauma and the same drama over and over and over again, the reality will end, because it won't have the anchor, in a sense, to keep it going. The structure is gone. The minute you start changing your role, you're changing the scenery, in a sense. The whole structure of the reality starts to fall apart. We've talked about this before, where if you try to take a reality where you were the victim, and all of a sudden you're becoming empowered, well, now that victim reality that everyone's playing in for you to be the victim, you've now learned your lesson. You're not the victim, so the reality has no purpose anymore, so it dissolves. Well, a lot of times we want to take realities that had that purpose, and all of a sudden we want to make them something else. We want to transcend them into something else. And if everyone's not on board with that transition process, can't do that. Sorry about that. My video cut off right in the middle. I could not get it to come back on again. Okay, so I don't even know where I was. I'm going to try to splice this together as best I can. But okay. I don't remember where I was. Let me try to recap where I was here. We do have to be aware that we are the people that keep it going. We are the reason. We are the separation across time and space. We are the reason our realities don't show up right away. Our body vibration is the reason for that. Our beliefs that make up that vibration are the reason for that. There's a lot of reasons why we cannot get to things very quickly. It's the only reason time is set up is because our human consciousness buys into the illusion of time. Where we're kind of reconditioned to believe this all takes time. It doesn't take time. It only takes time because we have to have it take time, because we are not willing to let these realities play themselves out. We are not willing to let these realities go, because the identity we have to the reality, what we're getting from it, the story we're getting from it, and it doesn't even matter what the story is. Like I said, most of the time people are holding on to stuff, and the stories are not stories that you would feel like you want to continue, but for some reason we do. I see the survivor story a lot. Everyone wants to rehash that story, and how long they have to go to therapy to work all this stuff out. We have to do that because we can't let it go. We can't resolve it. We have to keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it until we don't even want to talk about it anymore. Like I say, it's the long way to clear something. It's still a clearing process. It's just the way the human does it. It is the long way to do it. And you will find the higher your body vibration goes, the higher your consciousness goes, you will be able to clear things a lot faster. You don't need 8 years of therapy to walk through something anymore. You will be able to see it for what it was, understand the purpose of it from a higher consciousness place, and move forward. You know, when everyone's sitting around from a human consciousness and talking about an issue, it just doubles down on the beliefs within that consciousness. It's not really helping get us out of it. Besides the fact we keep talking about it to the point where even we eventually clear enough of it from our body, we can go on from it. But there are sometimes even beyond that, that we get so locked in the story that we don't want to take responsibility. And even just taking responsibility in those realities shifts our role now. We're no longer the bystander in that reality that got victimized. Now we were the one that created it for us to clear victim energy. Now it's different. Now I'm no longer the side supporting actress. Now I'm the main actress in this movie, and I'm creating all of it. Just that shift loosens it. You know, it loosens the connection we have to it. It loosens the reason we have to have it. And when we realize how much this stuff keeps us bogged down to recreating the same stuff over and over and over again. And that's another reason we recreate the same stuff. We recreate the same stuff so we can continue to clear the same part of that program over and over and over again. It gets faster. People will say that. It gets faster the higher your consciousness goes. And I do believe that. I do believe it gets quicker. I've felt it myself. We just don't bog down on it. You're not going to bog down on stuff like you used to. But when we're in those phases of continuing to bog down on them, really look at why. Don't worry so much about what the story is. The story doesn't really matter. What's your attachment to the story? What's the role you're playing in the movie where you don't want to let it go? You know, no one's winning an Oscar for it, but we're still kind of continuing to play it out, and we just have drowning it out. If someone was watching this on TV, how many times would they have said, this is the most dragged out storyline I've ever seen? I know I'm very much guilty of that in my human experience. And in the beginning of my ascension, I was still doing that, where you keep playing out the same stuff. You might get a different partner here and there to play it out with, but it's still the same thing because I wasn't willing to let the story go. My identity with the story, what did that story make me feel like I was? Did it make me feel important? Did it make me feel, what was I getting from it? That's the most important thing you want to look at when we start really trying to break away from this stuff and see that we're the reason we're taking so long. It's not anybody else. It's us. It's always us. That's the one thing to remember in Ascension and in Awakening. When we want to sit there and really ponder over what it is, the answer is always going to come back to it's us. I'm prolonging this. I don't want to close this out. I don't want to let this go. I don't want to really resolve this. Now, there will be some that will take some time to do because there's so much of it there. Because the consciousness you're in, we have to work through it slowly. You know, that's just how that's going to go. It would be too much of a shock to try to clear it all at one time to our body. Our body's vibration raises slowly for a reason. Our body wasn't meant to hold this much of our soul. It wasn't designed to, so it's got to rework. It's got to reprogram. It has to. There's a reason why full body ascension, which is, you know, returning back to your original soul template, takes 10 years at a minimum if you're giving it everything you have, because your body has to rewrite. So there are parts of the process we'll be in where we feel like it is taking a long time. But if you're conscious of that, then you're already way above where you were when you weren't even conscious of that. And I have seen people who get to the point where they can clear something immediately. You know, I mean, I've gotten to some things I can. Some of the deeper ones might take me longer, but nowhere near as long as it took me like 2 or 3 years ago, or even 6 months ago to do it. Because we start to see the trick to clearing anything, the trick to, you know, I don't like the word healing because it's such a human word, but the trick to healing anything, get to the bottom of why we're holding it. What is it bringing us? The human's only going to hold something that's going to bring it something. It has no interest in holding something that's not worth anything to it. You know, it does not. So it's holding it for a reason. It's getting something from it. Our job is to figure out, what is that? What am I getting from this? Why am I trying to hold on to this? Why do I want to keep this? So, okay, for my video conks out again, I'm gonna sign off on that one, and I'll see everyone next time. Keep practicing the art of intuition.